All right. We can't miss a week because we get trade deadline next week. So, bit of a slow, quiet, you know, I'll call it chat today and this week. Start the, uh, very important week 8 here. But we got RJ, we got the Vikings ready to talk about what some teams need to be doing right now. We said things we were ready to say last week, although I think I may have pulled the punches on a couple of the things I thought there, but nonetheless, now we're getting ready to talk about specific teams, saying who's ready to look at their team objectively, understand where they are, and what they can be doing here. Like I mentioned last week, and Jeremy called out in chat, this could get really fun because of the number of potential competing teams and the assets that could come available from teams that probably should be sellers. That, like, let's get out there, let's start talking about what you should be go getting, and heck, if deals come to mind, RJ and I are going to talk about it. So RJ, we're getting a little specific. We're going to dive deep on a couple teams here. We don't even know who we're going to pick at this point. We're just getting into it.
Yep. This is off the cuff. We're just going to come up with some ideas and hopefully make some people make some trades.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be with us. It's just, activity is fun. Things moving around is fun. And frankly, teams positioning themselves for the postseason helps kind of liven up the middle of the season. So I guess we can go ahead and start with a division instead of a particular team. But, one team has already accepted what's going on here, and it's time for the others to jump on board. You suggested them, RJ, so why don't you kind of introduce this?
Oh, is this the AFC?
Absolutely.
Okay. The AFC East. I think they need to take a page out of the NFC West's book last year. And the majority of them, or if not all of them, should probably start moving some things around and thinking about next year. Somebody's going to win that division, sure, but it does not look like any of those teams are going to do anything in the playoffs once they get there, whoever it may be. So it's probably better off for them to start some kind of a sell-off. Patriots obviously is well ahead of the other three, but the other three should probably just start sorting by age and selling off the oldest productive guys.
And again, this is not just because every team has a losing record, but again, like RJ said, if you look at each of these teams based off of where their guys are this year, they're not making noise in the postseason. I get it. Dolphins made a run last year, but this is a different Dolphins team. But if you take the assets on these teams and turn them kind of towards the future, again, imagine, despite what people are saying, like in terms of his proficiency, like Dak Prescott is a productive fantasy player and is likely to be a starter in fantasy for at least 3 or 4 more years. So a 4-year contract at $17.4 million for a quarterback of that quality is not a bad thing. Granted, Eric may quit fantasy before he trades Dak because Dak was one of his guys and one of his calls early on. But again, moving him around makes a lot of sense. Tony Pollard's going to bring you back a nice chunk of change. Granted, maybe not as much as the beginning of the season, but there's always second half. A.J. Dillon, if he can leave his farm alone, could be a very nice piece. Again, he's already got 2 young receivers in Bateman and Judy who are underperforming, who may make just some sense to hang on to. But then shift the defense, like he's got assets all over the place that literally if he sold his offensive pieces like Dak and his running backs, and then his defensive players are kind of seconds and thirds, he could be very well stocked going into the draft next year to sort of reset in 1 year and be ready to roll.
Yep. I had mentioned the NFC West before, but Rams, they did it last year. He tore down a portion of his team, and then look at it this year. It's not much of a race in that division. And if somebody of those three teams in the AFC East decide to do that, then they definitely could. With Bills, I agree. Pollard's probably one thing to look at. Dak's another thing to look at. You could turn Dak into a lesser quarterback and a pick next year to be like eyeing potentially another quarterback.
Yeah.
There's enough. One's going to be in the teens, teens or 20s pick wise. So, he could. Bills has the trading power to position himself into that and still have a quality team.
So, again, as people are going to be shocked to hear, I'm really interested in kind of that mid first type, late first quarterback next year, because guys like, everyone's talking about, would he fall if he declares, where does he wants to go back, but with a high profile QB coming in, Dion may nudge his kid towards going pro. If Shador declares, is he a top 10 pick next year? Probably at this point, but there would be some questions there. Quinn Ewers, he's the starter. He's just gotten hurt, and Arch Manning is sitting there waiting for an opportunity to take that job. So if Arch takes it and goes, and Quinn decides to declare, he had some pretty good tape earlier this year. He maybe goes in that late first, second round pick type range in the draft. He might fall. So he could have some pretty interesting shots based on some really good talent, based off of opportunity and kind of how the rest of the college season works out.
Yep.
But again, kind of since we're doing a division, we'll keep it going here. Dolphins. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was going to say that I was going to suggest you do Dolphins because you talked about it last week, and I think you have the best mindset for what Dolphins should do.
So, I mean, again, this is not the same Dolphins team as last year. It's Jalen Hurts is still one of the best assets in the league. Now, again, you're kind of praying that somehow you can stay out of the Pro Bowl so you can stay out of potential holdout range this offseason. But again, this could also be somebody else's problem. The haul you would get for Jalen Hurts at $1.15 million in terms of salary would be otherworldly. Again, would the people who would be trying to get him and compete be able to pay that? That's a good question. But again, if we just kind of did a cursory look, I bet we could find a couple of teams who'd be willing to, pay that price. Again, similar to what Jags did when they went and got Mahomes, just ponied up and went and paid what it took to get him. The Browns just acquired a New England 2025 first-round pick, which could be very strong in an offer for Hurts. Again, if I sent, say, Russ Wilson, a first, and a couple of other pieces, would that be enough to pry Hurts loose? I think the answer is probably no right now, but really should figure out what it takes to get to yes. And again, just send out a couple ideas. Like, okay, this is what I would need from this team, and send the offer and see if that team's willing to pay the price. Like, it would be really fun to see one of these top three quarterbacks hit the trade market as everyone, who's kind of hit that double-digit win total is trying to position for the second half here. And then, of course, the other big piece, Saquon Barkley. He's performing again. He's been carrying the team since he's been back. If you're ever going to move a guy like that, especially at that price and what his future could or, could change into, this is the time to sell him.
Yeah, I don't see there being a time in the future where his value will be comparable. It's probably I'm not going to say it's going to go down, but it's not going to maintain this value much longer. So it's probably better to move on now before you have a depreciating asset.
Yep. Then again, Ernest Jones, kind of shifting over the defense. Brian Burns obviously is a key piece that could bring something nice back. Chris Jones, same situation. And then I don't think Ernest was as strong last year as he was this year. So at 1.25 million, there may be an opportunity here before week 8 to extend him at a much lower price point. And if you were to move him to a team, I think you get probably a second, if not better, for Ernest.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would be very interested to see Ernest get moved, and Brian Burns is a big one for me.
Yep.
I just think you can get really good value for him right now.
So yeah, again, we mentioned anyone can win this division, but it may be better to make sure you aren't the one who wins it this year, because who knows what's going to happen. Do you want to take the Jets?
Yeah. So Jets is one of those I would be moving off of Jimmy once is he healthy again? Once he starts becoming somewhat productive.
Healthy-ish is all you can kind of say.
Yeah, I think at this point you kind of just try to move him before the deadline. So even if he doesn't play this week or anything like that, I'm moving him for what I can get. Jets really didn't address the running back room, and that was one of the biggest things. Deontay Johnson's already proven that he's productive, and Jets already has a decent amount of youth with wide receivers, so I don't see there being a reason to just hold on to Deontay Johnson. You probably just turn him into somebody a little bit lower ranking wise, but a little bit younger. Ideally, if somebody wants to pay Odell Beckham like that, cap wise, I should say, he should be relatively cheap, but you could at least get some type of compensation back. Sell all the defensive tackles, whatever you can get for them, except for the one in Dallas.
Right. Again, the rookies that you've invested in and plan to build around.
Yeah, the majority of the defense doesn't look like anything that I'd be actively trying to move. I mean, you're actively trying to move them, but I wouldn't be like going crazy and trying to move like a Jack Campbell or like a Will Anderson. Those are going to be great pieces to hold on for longer periods of time. But I'm sure somebody would pay a reasonable price for Jerome Baker, who is like super productive and probably somebody you could capitalize on right now. I don't know how much longer he's going to stay in Miami, so it wouldn't be bad to just get rid of him and capitalize on the Byard trade.
Yeah.
I mean, good luck. It's an expensive safety, and nobody wants expensive safeties, but you could at least try.
That's true. All right, you want to do Pats as well, since you're as familiar with the inner workings of his team, to make sure that he comes out on top when you guys played?
Yeah, Pats is doing just fine. I really like the purchase of CeeDee Lamb. I think it was a bit bold to trade off his first round pick, but that's fine. The only thing that he really needs to look to move is there anything other than no? Stay put. He's kind of good. Because there's nothing.
Either you don't want to sell low on some of these guys. We'll talk about the CD acquisition a little later on when we get the trades. But yeah, exactly. Just diamond hands, hold.
Yeah, this is a fantastic team. Like a team that you like a tanking team that should be happy like where they are.
Right. But yeah, this stuff's going to clear and be a very fun team, especially if Stidham gets a little run and you can flip him. That'll be the interesting thing is, does Wilson lose the job soon enough for Pats to, capitalize on Stidham, or does he need to flip Stidham now when he can take maybe less of a win on it and make sure he avoids the points in the long term.
Well, I think you initially start out with just offering to the Russell Wilson owner, like, do you want the insurance? And then, if we get another week of Russ isn't playing bad, but he's not winning any games for his team. And if you get another week of that, then maybe you reach out to anybody else that might be light at quarterback or have a quarterback that's like one of the lower half quarterbacks in the league who they would just like some type of like a shot in the dark to have a second like producer.
Yep.
But yeah, I would definitely you take what you can get. Once we get closer to deadline, which I know we're relatively close now, but
Yeah, a little over like a week and a half out. So next 10 days, let's get crazy. Um, let's jump to from a division to we'll stay in the AFC, but another team that probably isn't ready to sell, but really needs to embrace it. That's the Ravens. Look, I want to be clear. Telling a team with the second highest point total in the league that they need to be sellers sounds pretty dumb. But stick with me here. There are going to be 5 teams that make the playoffs between the Broncos, Chiefs, Raiders, Bengals, Browns, Steelers, and Ravens. That's 7 teams. Ravens are 6-3. So the 5th ranked team of those right now are 8-3. So they need to pick up 2 wins on these teams, some of whom they've already lost to in their division, and at the same time have them drop the games to allow them to sneak in at 6 or 7. You're going to be good enough that your pick is not going to be anything below 12. So who gives a shit if you have your pick back? Sell what you got and go accumulate. Like, there's some really, really good pieces here. The way Tua was playing, he could get a pretty solid mint for him, I'd say, whereas that may not have been the case coming into the season. Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Rashid Shaheed, like these guys are going to be very good, extension renegotiation or, cornerstone type guys that are multiple firsts or first plus range. He could very well build a team up to something that is ready to just jump right back in next year because I know he's always ready to go for it. But kind of your team's really, really good. I get it. You just had absolute shit luck. And sometimes you just got to say, hey, this dealer is kicking my ass. Let me walk away from the table while I still have some money left instead of just letting me get beaten down and have her take it all. So, take the break, walk away with your, smaller stack, turn it back into a big stack, and walk back to the table when it's a little bit hotter, I'd say.
Yep. The players that I'd be looking at, I'd consider moving Tua, but I'd look to move Tyreek because, oh my gosh, I don't. Tyreek's, you'd get an obscene amount of picks plus players for Tyreek right now.
Yeah.
I try to move Taysom Hill. There's going to be a buyer. There's somebody with more wins than you that will definitely buy him. Josie Jewell. He's going to be 29 in December. Oh, no. Yeah. Sell.
But again, he has the opportunity to sell the Tua Tyreek stack, considering the way that Miami's looked. And the fun things you could put together package-wise for that to teams that are on the verge of the playoffs would be pretty fun. Teams with, I'd say, a probably solid depth of assets who may want to consolidate around those. But again, has to jump into it. All right. Do you have anyone else in the AFC, or do you want to jump over to the NFC?
I have one, but not a seller.
Right.
Raiders needs to kick it into high gear and start buying. Like there needs to be an excessive amount of offers out every week until he can no longer make offers. He needs to be buying anybody that could be productive at positions. Um, you just beat what was probably the best team in the league, so definitely take it that take that and capitalize on it.
Yeah, I mean, he could. It would be a really interesting pivot because Xavier Hutchinson got a lot of strong press in the preseason, hasn't really produced as much. But again, the Houston receivers are good things to own right now. Alec Pierce is a little bit of odd man out, but it still holds some value. Michael Wilson's had his moments and looks like a really good piece in Arizona, especially at a second round pick price. If you wanted to pivot off that into something that could really help him more in the here and now, that might be a really interesting thing to do. Tight end, he's getting by thanks to Jonnu Smith. The amount of targets he's getting that may hold out, but I could see an upgrade not being a bad decision there. The big thing is, the front four.
What if he took Alec Pierce? I was gonna say, what if there was like a package of Alec Pierce and Jonathan Taylor and Lamar Jackson that could somehow result in like Tua, Tyreek, Taysom Hill? But I don't think it's there.
No.
I don't think the value of Taylor is there anymore.
I mean, I will always be a Taylor stan, but this might be the best thing for Raiders as it comes to Taylor because he's going to get that fifth year option. It's already been exercised. This means he's going to stay out of the Pro Bowl. So if you were going to even think about extending him, you actually have a shot at doing it versus being in the no touch zone. Yeah, that's gonna be the tough thing with Lamar is like this is the time. If you were gonna sell him, like it is now, it is this value when they're talking about him like this.
Well, it's just like using that to address the need at running back is the biggest thing. Like you could go from Lamar to somebody that's put up 100 points or 120 points, and then actually probably have a running back that's given 60 or 70 points already this year.
Well, I mean, if you wanted to go address running back, he takes Charbonnet and he gets what he needs. Again, just because I know he has a running back that's available. Like if he goes to the Texans and says, "Here's Charbonnet, I'm taking Hunt plus," and can address some of these items with what's on that team, and Charbonnet more fits what Texans is doing long term. Again, he's not the only owner that could work with, but he's got some of these young pieces that he could immediately turn around and say, all right, I'm cashing in the Michael Wilson for Rashid Shaheed. Again, not saying that's a fair trade, but go, like you said, go to the Ravens and get some of those pieces that make sense and give the right building pieces that are going to bounce next year, I think.
Yeah. It feels like something with like Raiders and Jets should happen. Just because that's the a Jimmy G and Odell Beckham, maybe Deontay Johnson can get moved for like a Lamar Jackson size contract.
Oh man, what could be? No, he wouldn't do that, but it would be fun to see Falcons put something together for the Raiders, and I think that's my next team to transition here a little bit. Is I talked about it last week of how much fun it would be for some of these really talent laden teams to, dip their dough into selling. Like imagine if they said, okay, here's Gardner Minshew, Travis Etienne, Chris Godwin, and Darren Waller. Like, I have a starter for you at 4 different positions on offense. Any competing team that has any first round pick not named Bijan should be jumping at an offer around those.
Yeah, I if Falcons wants to sell ETN, I think the majority of the league is interested in him. Um, so it would be very interesting to see the type of offers that he could field from that. I he could just put all of his running backs on trade bait and just
Clean up.
restock on picks and just be ready for next year. I I I would put I mean, I'd honestly put the majority of that offense up, like you said, Chris Godwin, uh, Debo, Curtis Samuel, all of them. They're all valued enough to where you could just turn these into picks and then turn them into 22-year-olds next year.
And I mean, the defense too. Like he's ready made to do a bit of a sale here. Like Levante David is a rental, but at 9.5 million, like that's very attainable and very fittable for a lot of teams who are competing who might need another linebacker.
Yep,
Um, Again, a lot of his offensive pieces between those running backs and receivers definitely fit the bill there. And again, he's got some good production from Epinesa finally, and that contract's looking very nice. So definitely, he's got pieces all over the place that he just needs to engage and you know get the value for those while they make sense. Again, Waller had an incredible game this last week.
he
So if
looked
you're gonna,
fantastic.
yeah, it's go move him at elite tight end prices again because at his age you may not have that window much longer.
Yep. Drew Tranquil is a great one to capitalize right now.
Yep.
Like Nick Bolton's out. Like Tranquil's probably gonna play Bolton out of a job. Like somebody go pay $3 million for this, high scoring linebacker.
Again, don't mind if I do. I will likely be sending a couple offers as a result of these conversations. So that's the fun part of these things as well. All right, what is your next thought about the NFC?
Well, you talked about discussions that we had afterwards, and one that's been a discussion for a few weeks is Lions. Not specifically Lions as a whole, but I think that's a great lead into Lions should be looking to sell off some things. Couple of things here and there. It's kind of unfortunate that Jerome Ford got hurt. He would have been a great asset to move around this time, just because I'd imagine there's a lot of buyers that are paying well for somebody like that. I don't necessarily know if Lions has him pegged as a long-term hold. Josh Palmer is a great thing to capitalize on the Mike Williams injury right now. Sell him for what he was in 2021, and just recoup your cost and go buy somebody you like next year. The one that gets thrown around a lot with us is Puka. Maybe Lions really likes Puka and thinks that he's going to be a fantastic long-term asset. I think the majority of us don't necessarily think that he's always going to be 147 points in the first 8 weeks. So sell him while he's at this like high of value. Turn him into somebody else that's just as young and higher dynasty ranking. I'm sure there's plenty of players roughly around his value that have far more draft capital, like real life draft capital associated with them that you could just turn him into. Defense, start moving off of some of these guys that have popped. Henry, with all the T's and the O's. Yeah, so like him, maybe a little bit lesser so than like a Damone Clark, but Clark, Devondre Campbell, like wouldn't hurt to move off of these guys. Is Campbell healthy yet? You might need to sell Campbell off for a little bit less than you would hope for, but a 30-year-old linebacker that isn't healthy before trade deadline, there might be a contender that's paying for him because they know what the production he provides when he's healthy. 16 points a game, probably. You might need to sell him for a little bit less, but that's probably what you need to do right now.
Yeah. Agree. And again, some of these things can be building blocks. Like Clark could be a very cost-effective building block, depending on how much he scores this year. Again, whether renegotiation makes sense now or to hold on for that. But the prospect of a less than $1 million linebacker at this point is a very attractive piece for someone who's trying to buy for both this year and next year. Jake Ferguson's another one of those that has had its moments. Fourth round pick value can be extended after this year. Could be a very good long term piece for him to hold, or frankly flip if people think that he's going to start bouncing back in Dallas. Receivers, you really hit nail on the head there. Just again, there's at least 2 or 3 teams that need at least 15 of these players. So get active, and you can make this year the last year of the build.
Yep.
Again, another one we kind of alluded to. One that, again, is going to be a little bit off expectation, but I think makes some sense here is I want to see the Seahawks start positioning. And that doesn't necessarily mean selling. It doesn't necessarily mean buying. But again, right now, he's been sitting there and letting things marinate with Justin Herbert, Breece Hall, JSN, Kyle Pitts, and then a number of promising defensive rookies with the picks he's got coming up. So, again, now it's time to kind of pivot some of this stuff and say, okay, does it make sense for me to kind of keep hanging on to Pitts, or do I capitalize on some of the last couple of weeks, get good value for him, and position myself really for next year to be the year that I step up in the NFC West? JSN seems to be picking up targets. Downs is looking really good after this last week. He's got really the core of something here, but he's got a lot of other pieces that probably are going to get shed from his team. So can he shed some of those, but then can he pivot some of the others to give himself a little bit better of a base going into next year's draft process?
Yep. He has all the nice flashy names, but he needs to really focus on depth. You mentioned a Kyle Pitts, so I probably wouldn't move Pitts, but one thing that did come to mind is if he moved Pitts for some group of players from the Lions, including like a Jake Ferguson and some other stuff, like that would probably be an ideal move, because you're still going to have what you should assume will be a starting tight end next year, but you're moving the value of Kyle Pitts into another position where you probably need to put that value.
Look, again, it would be really interesting because it would be a pivot for both sides, but no, that's not who has him. I was thinking, is there a Falcons and Seahawks deal that makes some sense here? Of again, Seahawks realigning where he wants to be, and hell, if Falcons decides to stick his nose up and say, "Screw it, I'm staying in the race," and do something like Richardson plus for Herbert, which again is a deal that has been made, I think, with Seahawks, but since Richardson has gone through me, would be a possible trade. Position himself with Richardson again and a little bit more, value by selling Herbert, and Falcons gets another run at it.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Like if let's just keep going with this. So if it's Minshew, Richardson, and I don't know, Christian Watson for Herbert and just call it Herbert. Maybe there are picks thrown in there to even it out. So Seahawks now has Richardson and Minshew back, so he's going to at least have a player scoring points at quarterback, so not necessarily tanking. Have Richardson built with next year with the rest of that team. Add Watson as a third receiver on offense, and any kind of draft capital as part of that. Again, just we're suggesting where teams should go. If they go the other direction, some of these guys still have that optionality.
Yeah. Definitely an option. I don't know. I guess I've conditioned myself to thinking Falcons should be selling. It's hard to imagine him buying. It wouldn't be a bad idea.
The other interesting team that could do some repositioning, I guess, and apologies for interrupting, is Cardinals. So they've kind of torn down. They've activated the IR to make sure that they don't take on extra cap hits at this point. But again, a lot of these guys were shots that have missed. And again, a $7.6 million camp rate on your roster does nothing for you, Ted. Get these guys off, flip the Shaq Leonards of the world who are now back and scoring again. Get the Ahmad Gardners off your team, while you can. And get the value you can for them. Lance McCutcheon was a miss. Sucks, but get rid of him. Clean some of the stuff so you have room to make more deals, especially, and not having to keep these IR guys active to keep from getting cap penalties. Some of the stuff is great building blocks. Like Michael Mayer, great building piece. Glad you have him in place. Kyler could still pull back, a pretty good chunk of change right now. We'll be interested to, shop him around and see what his value is. Shaq Leonard, same kind of thing, $12.2 million, and a linebacker in that system seems to be a pretty good place to be. So, will be good to see him go through and start pivoting some of the assets he has, not just into the picks, but players and positions that he wants to grow.
Yep. Yeah, you could turn Shaq Leonard into just a younger player to pair with Nakobe Dean next year.
Exactly. Let's do one more, and again, I'll suggest it because I know he's not going to do it, but it's just fun to rib at him a little bit. Cowboys, please start buying again, and this is against my best interest as a NFC team, because God knows I don't think I'd want to play you in the playoffs, but you're very shaky at running back. You've got Adams and Addison, which seems to be a dynamite tandem at wide receiver, but your third spot is relying on Kendrick Bourne. Go buy some things, go shore some things up, and make yourself into a real threat to compete with the NFC North wildcards that are going to be in there. Because, one of you guys is going to knock down at least one of the division winners. And then it's going to be neck and neck with some of the good record division winners. So it's going to be depth that matters there. And Cowboys got the big names, but really needs to build out the rest of that depth if he has any intention of getting past the first round.
Got to get better at tight end too.
Yeah.
That is a shaky position.
This would be a really fun team. Again, just idea off the top of my head. If he goes with Addison to the Falcons and says, give me Godwin, give me Waller, and give me David Montgomery, and then I need you to eat some salary as part of this as well. Actually, you may not even. Yeah, I need you to eat some salary as part of this as well. Like that kind of deal is what takes him from being a playoff participant to a very dangerous team.
Yeah, I agree. There's
And that would
not a
just be
whole.
fun because, again, it's been a while, but back in the early days of the podcast for the draft specials, Dallas would join every once in a while and troll the fact that he didn't respond or like the offers that we were sending and stuff like that, or garbage, etc. So an active Cowboys is a hell of a lot of fun. So I want to see him stick his toe a lot more into the playoff pool here because he could be a really fun team.
Yep. I don't see a whole lot of things that could be moved on the roster, but I do agree. Like if you're going to break down somebody like an Addison, the only other thing that I see is like a Micah, which I think we'd all be intrigued to see what Micah would get as far as trade value. But I don't see a whole lot more that you could just freely move off of.
Yeah, again, it wouldn't be depth for things. It would have to be picks and or breaking things down.
Right.
I know he's been hesitant to break certain things down, but then every once in a while will change his mind and kapow, there goes TJ Watt. So
Right.
again, it would just be fun to see just send offers out, Cowboys, around Parsons. Like go to a team's page and just go shopping based off of what you want and have the conversation and see if you surprise yourself. You might throw something out there that I say, you know what, I'm in. And then, you know what, you've given yourself an embarrassment of riches for admittedly a very good player and made your overall team better. And at the end of the day, we're here to try and win games. Just that's what you do.
Yep. I agree.
All right. Let's talk trades. We asked people to jump in both feet last week during the pod. And tell you what, people listened. 18 trades this week. Bravo. And we asked for a blockbuster and we got at least one. So let's just start firing through it, starting from Bill swapping kickers once again with the Patriots.
Yeah, at least he paid a fourth this time.
Yeah. Cheating bastard. Then I go buying a San Francisco running back from Chargers because A, I'm a homer, and B, I think, hey, McCaffrey's hurt. Mitchell's not very good in the close yard situations. This is a guy's a shoe-in. McCaffrey plays with a busted oblique and plays every single freaking down. So, you know what? Best intentions backfiring, but what can you do?
Yeah, that was rough.
Hey, but Kenny Nwanyu getting me like 3 points because of special teams play, so I'll always take that.
Gotta love it.
Falcons breaking down Dwayne Smoot for a fourth and Jerry Tillery. I mean, not a lot to say there.
No, I don't know, goodbye on Chiefs' part. Maybe Smoot becomes productive. I think he just came off of an injury. Yeah, he just came off of IR. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Might have been like the perfect buy low scenario.
I mean, he's a perfect goose guy too because he's $500,000 and again 2 years on his contract, so very good. Well, could be extendable at that price. And at 28 years old, that wouldn't be the worst idea. But exactly the kind of guy that Goose goes after. Jets and Cardinals swapping punters. Good for you.
Disgusting. Why aren't there picks involved?
Scotty Miller and Nate Shepard for a fifth. You know what? Fun shots by Bill. For pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Here's again a surprising one. Eric giving up a fourth for PJ Walker. I get it. I don't hate the idea, but again, it's I guess Bill's decided that he wants to win the division, and hey, get all he needs is a chip and a chair. So get himself a seat at the table at the playoffs and see what happens.
Yeah. I think we made our feelings about that division known, but if all it costs is buying another quarterback at the cost of a fourth round pick to secure yourself that division win, it's fine.
Yeah. Here comes the blockbuster. Julio Jones, which I believe was just cap filler, $21 million. So a cap dump on Pat's part, along with his 25 first, 25 second, 25 third, and 25 fifth for CeeDee Lamb.
That's cheap CeeDee.
I mean, here's how I'm thinking about it, though. So I thought that as well. But again, we don't know what the 25 class is, or some people might know think they know what the 25 class is at this point. I can't even pretend to guess. I don't have that level of knowledge at this point. But even with what Patriots has, and even what he's going to get in this draft, he doesn't have a ton of picks left. So he's going to have to continue to flip what he has into a team. With other teams not being good in the East, are they going to continue to not be good next year, or is next year going to be a bounce back? Is he going to be a real big playoff team? So again, if you think that Pats is going to be a bottom 8 team, say, is a bottom 8 first worth CeeDee Lamb at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent price. You probably want a little bit more, but
right. And again, I'm trying to think back to this draft. What would have the 10? I think 108 was like Zay Flowers or something like that.
I'm pretty sure. Didn't one of the previous widers? Yeah, 108 was Quentin Johnston.
Okay.
But what was the pick that got traded for Olave?
That was the Levis pick.
Yeah.
So again, that could be interesting. But nonetheless, again, I would prefer the CeeDee side, but it did make me think. And Browns has been savvy like this before, to go get the first that he thinks is going to appreciate in value. So he goes and gets it, and then takes a fifth and dumps the Julio contract to you. And now he's got what he could sell realistically as a very good 25 first. And, that may be a more attractive piece to some of these buyers or some of these sellers than CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, for sure. If it ends up being like 106, 206, 306, then the pick side of it was better than the Lamb side of it. We just have to wait a whole year for that to happen. Just at the thought, like a first, a second, and a third for CeeDee doesn't necessarily feel like the correct value for CeeDee. But once actual like pick spots get associated with it, that's when we'll get a better idea. So I say cheap CeeDee, but it could have been a steal.
Yep. All right, moving down to the Browns and Titans. KJ Henry for a fourth. Cardinals and Dolphins place kicker swap. Julio Jones moving with a fifth for a fifth. Three trades in 1 week with Julio Jones. You sign with the Eagles and good things happen to you.
Yep.
Quentin Jefferson for a fourth. You know what? Good for him. I went shopping for D tackles for fourths and got nowhere close to this. So good for him that he found a seller for that price.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good value.
Salvin Ahmed for Trent Taylor in a fourth. I'd say win-win. Bears picks up draft capital. Taylor has kind of a niche role with the Bears, but who knows what any role is going to be long term with the Bears this year. Ahmed is a great upside play, but
Yep.
again, is probably an injury or two away from actually seeing consistent touches. I tell you, I don't know enough about Miles Adams to know how I feel about the next trade. I think moving off of Powell is not a bad idea, especially considering this is probably the high point for him in Minnesota. But I don't know if a rotational D end and a fourth is what I'm selling out for.
Yeah, he seems to be getting a pretty reasonable amount of targets. It's tough. I do agree with kind of getting rid of him for whatever you could. If that's the most anybody was willing to pay, then like good on Bucks for making that offer. I would have liked to have seen more, but I don't expect there to have been a whole lot of people lining up offering better than a fourth round pick for Powell.
That's true. Let's see. Saints moving off of Khalil Mack for Isaiah Hodgins in a second. So Packers, I think, is now down to Aaron Rodgers for Khalil Mack in a third for what he did that deal for, or maybe he's already sold the third for another player. I can't remember. But the continued morphine of Aaron Rodgers on the Packers is interesting. But it is fun to see Jeremy make multiple trades in a week. Keep at it, man. It's good to see you back. Punter swap, Jonah Williams for multiple fourths, and Percy Williams in a fifth for a fourth. Percy Butler, sorry. Anything really blow your skirt up there?
The Mac deal, shocked that Mac went for a second round pick. I'd imagine some of that value was paying Saints to take Hodgins. But either way, interesting to see a second in Khalil Mack trade at this point in his career.
Yeah, again, it's a strong move, especially when he has that in him, and apparently the hope is that at some point he plays the Raiders again. But
yeah, definitely pay a second round pick to have 75.9 points in 1 week.
That would not suck. All right. I think that's all we've got in us for this episode. Anything else you want to cover before we wrap it up?
No, I just hope everybody gets out there and starts making offers. We don't have a whole lot of time, so start selling stuff, even the stuff you didn't expect to sell.
Yep.
Put it out there and be surprised at all the generous offers that you'll get.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I think we can get above 30 trades between now and next week's podcast.
Ooh, that sounds fun. Well, that means I have to get at least 30 offers out there.
Yeah, I think that's the fair thing to do. So we're going to get started on that. And when you see spam from both of us, your own damn fault for not acting first. But until next time, thanks for listening.